the long-term success of a client, they measured it, based on client happiness, how happy they were with their purchase. And they rate all those different criteria. And they were surprised to find that they big things that you find, like when somebody buys something, what makes them happy with their purchase? Is it the product? Like what they actually buy? No. Is it customer service? No. The number one thing that determined the success of the client relationship was the buying experience.
The Move Entrepreneur Evolved podcast. Get on it.
And we're back for the Moved Entrepreneur Evolved podcast. I'm here with Eli Wilde. What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good, brother. How are you? I'm happy to be here.
I'm doing pretty good. We're sometimes I always talk about weather in the beginning because it's just a natural thing. But in San Diego, I always tell people it's not always the postcard. We get that marine layer and then it's like never goes away. So when the sun comes out, it's game on. And today's one of those days.
Yeah, you'll have June gloom coming up. I lived in Los Angeles for a really long time.
Oh, then what that feeling is. It's just like, I got to get out of here. Palm Springs, and is one of the main reasons why that place became what it was. So I thought I'd kick something back for you. And for anybody here that hasn't heard of Eli, a sales specialist, you have a great story behind that. I look forward to kind of pulling that out if I can. And then you also have some staple people that you've worked with. We could bring those up too. But I always like to kind of go back a little bit and see if you could pull this. There was a post that you had created a little while back, and you'd said, just had a 4-hour dinner. That's the way family and friends are supposed to connect. Grateful. Yeah. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. And I've had many more since. But yeah, it's just, we live just these busy lives, and to go deep and connect, I love it. I just spent this weekend, my buddy Marcel Klein put on an event. Chase Hughes spoke, I'm really good friends with, and a new friend, his name's Bedros, but they call him Spidey. He's a mentalist. And so it was a young audience, but we just, we love this stuff and watching and critiquing each other and just seeing all the insights. So it was like I had a 3-day dinner with them. And of course we went out to dinner at night, and my business partner, who's Eli also, he came. My business partner has the same name, just to confuse everybody.
That makes it good.
Yeah. So yeah, I love it. Yeah. And I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, it's kind of, and the reason I brought it up is, being in sales and things like that, a lot of, and this has always been, fast sales, trying to get to the sale. But also I think what I saw in that post was you were generating relationships. And I'm sure that even 2013 you've probably nurtured those relationships over the years and profited from them, or just had great stories with them.
Yeah. It's a buddy of mine. I was supposed to speak at an event this weekend with Gary V, but I had too much going on. But I was supposed to, I come into events and I'll be the last speaker, and I close out the sales, and I'll speak somewhere in there just to add pure value. So I'm not just seen as like the last guy coming on, because I am going to push those final sales the last little bit. And so they've got to have a connection with me, and I've got to be framed appropriately. So there's a syntax to events and there's a syntax to sales. But I was saying to my friends, it's like I almost have too many friends. Like nobody knows really who I am, because I've never done any actual marketing. We're launching something now, and we've got some things that we're doing. But I've got we're going to do a JV launch, kind of like Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi did, where they made $40 million. I've got all those emails and systems and all of it, but it'll just be, my content, but similar JVs. But I've never tried to launch anything, and just off word of mouth, I've, people reached out to me, and I've got friends that do the same thing that I do that are very good. But even some of their best clients have reached out to me and said, hey, can you do this? We'd rather work with you. And I don't tell them that, but
you like the story. You reminded me of Chris Stapleton. His story is like, I was in the background the whole time, and then he decided to come to the front stage.
Yeah. He's amazing.
Dude, I saw him. It really funny though. Like I saw Chris Stapleton in concert, and it was one of the worst concerts I've ever been to. Now people could say that they went to a great one, but I felt like he got in a fight with his wife and he had to go home real quick.
That happened. Yeah, wow.
But he was a great. His music's incredible. I got another one for you, and this goes back, and I think that we can kind of anchor off this, but it was a while back as well, and actually it's 10 years ago. But I think it probably holds still. He said, I find a few things more annoying than an attitude of entitlement. You earn respect, you earn rapport, you earn the ability to take a day off, you earn your paycheck. You earn your body, you earn your passionate, loving relationships, you earn your results. And when you do what's necessary and get those rewards, they feel so much better, deeper down, because you know you put in your time correctly. How does that hold up today?
Oh, man. And one, I got to be careful of what I share on social media because it can catch up to you. But
I
that's
got your
a good
back,
one.
brother.
And,
I got your back.
Yeah, that's a good one. That holds true. I tell you, I went on a date not too long ago, and this person just like who are these people? You know, just so entitled, just the worst attitude ever. It's just such a turnoff in every way. You know, you gotta earn it every single day, put it out there. And you know, it's if I ever get like another tattoo, it'll be this. And I would used to draw this all the time as I'm doodling and on my wall, kind of like a red arrow going backwards and a green arrow going forwards and a blue dot in the middle, and just reminding myself that's where I am every day. And then just like a black dot slightly into the green to remind myself just to move forward. Because, you know, in my life, I've definitely had times where it's like I work really hard and I'm pushing and I'm grinding and I go far forward fast, and then I like rest or I do something dumb. And then it's like people will starve themselves on a diet and they get in shape, and then they'll binge on Sunday and they're right back to zero. And so they worked so hard. They've moved so much forward and back, and now they're right back at the starting point. The only difference is they're exhausted. And so if I could just focus on just a little bit each day, it's just always a good reminder to get 1% better at what I'm doing each day, and that I've got to earn that little bit, as opposed to just, you know. And sometimes I watched the Undercover Billionaire with Grant Cardone, and you know, it's cool at that level. Amazing. Couldn't use his name. He just like had to go out there and get it. And, you know,
and didn't you feel like him for a minute? Like, I kind of was like, I could feel you. Like this would happen to me too.
Yeah. You know, it was good. It was humbling, and he wanted to quit a bunch of times. And I think it was cool. They showed all of that because, you know, he's so big and he talks about money, and he doesn't connect with his audience that well. So the right audience he does well, but a lot of people are turned off by him, and his sales skills are not the best. You know, I think hopefully even he would say that, because they're based in car sales and from the 80s. So sales has evolved a bit, but you know, his mindset is just amazing. And
I was just going to say, do you think it was his just ability to push through? I mean, do you think he just pushed through the noise so hard that sales technique worked? You think that?
Yeah, he's just reps, charisma. You know, the things that do make him good, he doesn't teach. And the things that make him good aren't necessarily teachable. You know, there are aspects that, I mean, you can definitely make somebody charismatic. And I was talking to my buddy, and we had this argument, not an argument, but a conversation about a year ago. Like, can you actually make somebody more charismatic? Is there a way to train that? And we found out there is, and you definitely can. And so now it's something that when I work with clients one-on-one, we actually train on it. There's about 15 different aspects of unconscious communication that makes somebody perceived more as an authority and more dynamic. And so we train on those things. And when I work with speakers or even salespeople, I'll break them down on video, and I'll show where they're not connected, where they lose their confidence, where they are erratic or moving in a way that lowers their social stance, like, you know, or just like, you know, just not really present.
Sure.
You know, it's movement, confidence, movement, appearance, confidence, connection, and intent. And so we break down some of these things and measure people on it. And, you know, a great example of somebody, you know, also gratitude, enjoyment, leadership, discipline, and confidence. This is a different type of confidence. So, so there's confidence that's measured two different ways. One is your internal, and one is that outward perception. And so we look at all of this, and it frames somebody's communication. And a great guy to model, love him or hate him, President of the United States, Bill Clinton. And in his heyday, like nobody could connect like Bill Clinton. There was this warm, genuine, sincere, you know. And so when you see amazing behavior, and this is a tenet of NLP, you find somebody, don't just model what they say, like in sales, like what's the script? What are they saying? Grant Cardone, like what are they saying? but you want to model their, and this is an NLP, thing, their belief system, their mental syntax, and their physiology. And so their belief system, what do they believe about people, about themselves, about communication? And so we start to unpack that. And through a process, you can install these beliefs in people. And, and having a feedback loop where people measure themselves, that's the best way to get great at anybody. It's coaching where you get a feedback on your performance.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
No.
What, kind of going back a little bit, because everybody's story, in your story, you then became an entrepreneur in that state, but that wasn't your original state. I think going back, you'd done some modeling, right? Before that.
Yeah. I had moved to LA, and I'd been living in my car for a while. Then I get a job selling dental products, and I had a bunch of, opportunities, but they were like weird things, or some guy wants to take pictures of me, something like that. I was really kind of turned off by the whole industry. And I got cast to be in like the biggest movie ever. And I didn't get it. But I connected a lot with that Hollywood community, and it was still just on my mind. And then, so later on in life, I actually went for the modeling and acting stuff. And that was after I worked for Tony for a few years, got on a billboard in Times Square, and, started book stuff. And then, life happened and all of that. But yeah, it's like, I love that song that Garth Brooks has.
Yeah.
Sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers. And, it's like, I see some of these actors. I mean, and living in Los Angeles, I see like this beautiful man or this beautiful woman, artistic, creative, can speak well, elegant, flowing, and he's waiting my table. And then I'll see him months later and he'll book the gig. But you see a lot of these guys, they book that initial, series role or whatever, and they get paid $100,000 or $200,000. Like, I've made a lot more than that in a day now. And I'm just like, whoo, boy, you're like starving for scraps. And I actually, what phased me out of the acting was a buddy of mine had me watch a documentary. Are you familiar with Robert Evans? You know who that is?
Mm-mm.
He came to Hollywood, young man, and he was so charismatic, so good looking. He got himself in some movies and everybody hated him. And long story short is this, he produced the movie Godfather. You've heard of The Godfather?
Of course.
So that's all him. So he basically took over Hollywood. And what happened was, he got to Hollywood and he was so charismatic, so charming, and met the right people, got in all these movies, but he had no real acting skill, that he was very charming. And one day on set, the other actors pretty much just boycotted the film because they didn't want him in it. They were giving the cold shoulder, and then because he was like, just came out of nowhere, and nobody wanted to act with him. And it just like erupted on the set one day, and it was pretty much just like the movie was done. And then he heard one voice, and it goes, "The kid stays in the picture."
Yeah, I know.
And he, right there in that moment, so not another actor or director opened their mouth again, and the movie was made. And he said to himself, what the hell am I doing as an actor? I want to be that guy. I want to be the guy where I say something, everybody shuts their effing mouth and goes back to work. He's like, I it was like the voice of God. He was like, I want to be that. And he found out that was the producer, the ones that produce things and own things. And, as an actor, I mean, the ones you hear about, like The Rock or Brad Pitt, they produce a lot of their films. They realize that's where the money is. And as an entrepreneur, you want to be an entrepreneur as you have control. And as an actor, you have zero control. I booked gigs, and, I book it. I'm like this, 6'2" white guy. And they say, oh, we're changing the thing. We're going to put an Asian girl as that spot, and now, so much is out of your control regardless. And if you're like, there's few exceptions. Matthew McConaughey just came to and he just booked everything. But there's like 1 in a billion, and they're tough odds. So you have to really love it. And even then I have,
did you transition? Did you go from because from what I hear is that you were modeling, it was feast or famine. You just figure it out, right? You keep going that road. And then the guy that's your waiter, he becomes something maybe. But when you made that transition, did you look at going into, because those are two different things. One is, I mean, I don't say it like this, but you're selling your body, right? You're selling the figure, you're selling what you've put together, right? And then the other one is actually selling your vocals and things like that. Was there this is kind of an interesting question. I don't know if I think it'll resonate, but did you find an insecurity when you got so much attention as an attractive guy, as a model, and then everybody's telling you no, like, I don't, because you get rejection after that, right? Or did you like build that muscle when you were doing modeling?
Only did the modeling just to mainly get pictures. I was acting. And so that you have
Got it.
all that. I was cast in 2000, I guess it's 2004 to be Superman and Superman Returns. So it came down to me and a couple other people, and I didn't get it, obviously. And then I was like, and I looked at a lot of the criticism, the coaching that I got from acting. I didn't enunciate words, and and I wasn't clear in my communication, and I did mumble, and I could see the insecurity in me, and there would be change of direction where you see somebody who's very charismatic on stage. There's a confidence, there's a freedom because they feel safe to go off script and be in that creative mode. And if you're fearful and insecure and self-conscious, you can't be expansive, and that takes away the magnetism. And so all of that shows up even in pictures, not just film, in somebody's eyes, the way they connect to that camera, the way they don't care that it's there. And we've all got pictures where somebody took a picture of us and our eyes are like really big, and we're like, it's the look on the face. You can see what's behind the eyes. What's behind the eyes is, I hope I look good, as opposed to like the best look to have in your eyes, as something that one of my friends said when I was acting for headshots, having this look in your eyes that says, I know something that you don't know, like some mystery and some certainty. And there's a thought and a belief that comes through in that energy. And, for me, I began to really get curious about the internal workings of what makes somebody how they are. And so in that time frame, I wasn't a good communicator. I mumbled, I stuttered, all that. And I started to really work on my communication. And then somebody said to me, we should check out NLP. And I got really into it. And then somebody said to me, well, you should check out this guy, Tony Robbins. And I was like, who's Tony Robbins? And so I saw Tony, and I went through that process, worked there a few years, came back to LA, and now I had all this confidence. And I wanted to get into acting, but I couldn't book anything. I was 31 years old. And there was this dude named Greg Plitt, fitness model. He passed away a few years ago, but we're from the same town. We're like the same age, everything. And this guy's like an Adonis. And he booked this one gig, and there was so much publicity for that, it like set his career. So I was trying to get the audition. I found came up. I submitted like 20 times, and they wouldn't give me an audition. And because I had I had some headshots and all that, but you couldn't get in. And it was a professional dance show. So it was like the lead Abercrombie model, Versace model, like a bunch of, they put a billboard of you in Times Square, and they basically made you famous overnight. They put billboards around you all over Los Angeles, and you got all these opportunities, and you're on TV, like Chelsea Handler. Like, long story short, they had another role for like the speaker to introduce Hunky Santa and the sexy Santa guy. And so I submitted for that. I got into that audition. They liked me. And I said, well, hey, I really want to be the main dude. They're like, you want to be the main dude?
Kid in the picture.
Like, all right, we'll submit you. And so they put me into the main audition. It was 800 dudes, all like, it was like the best looking dude you've ever seen. And it goes from 800 down to 100, down to 30, down to 8. And I made the final 8, and it was televised. You had to dance, take your shirt off, and then there was an interview. And the final 8 are there. And it's like, literally, like, I mean, these guys are studs. I was probably the worst dancer, and I was not the best in shape. These guys were all better looking than me, all had more experience than me, all in better shape than me.
Come on, everybody felt the same. When you're on the stage, you're like, this guy's better than me.
I mean, these guys, they were pros for like their whole life.
They were pros.
This is what they did. And they had like big campaigns. They had done lots of experience. And so we went in, the last part was the interview. And, I listened at the door. First 2 guys go in, I listen at the door, and they asked him, like, why do you want to do this? And, I listened, he's in there like 5 minutes, and they asked the next guy the same question, and he's in there like 5 minutes. And I'm just like right there outside the door. I'm like, they don't get it. I'm going to win. I was just like, I'm totally going to win. And I went in there next, and I was in there about 45 minutes. And they asked me why I wanted to do it. So when they asked all these other guys why you want to do this, and so if anybody listening, same thing with a job interview, same thing with anything. Most people are all about themselves. And I took this into my selling ability. I'll get to that in a minute. But it's, people don't care about you so much as they care about themselves and what you can do for them. And I know in that interview, I knew what they were looking for, because Hollywood, this modeling, it's a business. It's a business. And so they asked these guys, why do you want to do it? big opportunity for me, a lot of publicity for me. I get on Times Square billboard. I get this, I get that. It's a good opportunity. I'm acting, I'm doing this. Here's what I'm interested in. Here's what I think is a good stepping stone, all that. And they asked me, why I want to do it. And so it was a dance show inside of like a big mall. And it was, this whole dance show with all these girls and everything. And, and it was like in the mall, and it was around Christmas time. And so they asked me why I want to do this. And I said, well, when you think about Christmas, when you think about that time of year, we have that magical moment on Christmas Day. But really for me, and I don't know if maybe this is for you as well, there were so many magic moments leading up to that moment. My parents got divorced when I was young. So I spent time with each parent, and we would often pick out, I would pick out a gift for mom with dad, and for dad with mom. And we would go to the mall and seeing Santa Claus there and being around that energy. Like if I could be somebody else's magic moment, we had so many together while shopping, and I have those memories. And if I could be a part of that memory for somebody else, that would that's why I'm here. And they were just like, that was a good answer. And so everything was like, so like they're asking me all these questions and stuff like that. And there was like, at one point, guy had like tear in his eye. He was like,
I was going to say someone's crying. Yeah.
And there, I was like, I got this. I was like, I nailed it. I was like, I just knew. I walked out of there. I was like,
it was like you made it bigger than yourself, right? You're like, look, I'm just a part of it. And because you see the joy in it, they're like, this guy wants the joy. Not
it was
just like
emotional connection. And I clearly said, I said, first of all, I complimented all these guys. I said, well, first of all, I'm just humbled to be here with all these other amazing men. Like some of them, any of these guys are great choices. Like you really can't go wrong.
Sure.
However, I will say this. I know they have great modeling and acting and dancing and all that backgrounds. I'm a professional speaker, and I know some cameras are going to be on me. And so just want to let you know that if that's important to you, to make sure that your public image and the right thing is said and there's no mistakes, I've actually been trained in that. And so anything you want to talk about, I'm open to, but I've already been trained in it. And I understand this is a business and you're wanting to do this to produce revenue. And that only happens if people have a good experience of me, of you, the brand. And so I'm really conscious of that. And I want to let you know you'll be fully safe. And so I want people to feel safe and certain.
Yeah.
And so whether you're selling yourself or anything, understanding the other person's point of view and connecting emotionally, and speaking in terms of their best interest, all that stuff plays a part.
Here's like a fun one. So you do a lot of selling from the stage. We were talking about it a little bit earlier as well, as you went up just a little bit ago. This might open it up, but I think these are the fun ones, right? Do you remember as you were going through a botch that you did, like as you were performing and trying to sell and close and things like that? Do you remember one where you just botched an entire thing that you forgot and you're like, I got to get back? Because that happens in sales sometimes. You like end up somewhere and you're like, I got to get back. I lost myself or something. You ever been in a situation like that when you were on stage?
After a presentation that I don't sell.
Yeah. You're like, what was the thing I botched? Especially when you start criticizing yourself more and more, you have enough volume, you can actually do that. Do you remember one that stood out for you? That was like, dang, I could have bought, or maybe your preparation was always good.
Well, the thing is this, and my preparation was always good. We had a canned presentation, a script, and, so we always did the same presentation, but sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And, and you could blame the script, you can blame yourself, you can blame the audience. There's a lot there to blame, but it's really focusing on the solution, being resourceful, all of that. And so my goal was always to sell 200% of the audience, to make it so powerful that everybody signs up and they're so engaged, they want to bring somebody else with them. And so that was always the goal. Did I always get that? No, but did I do it? Yeah. And so that's always the benchmark. And, at the end of every presentation, it's what was great about it, what could be even better. And there's, I spoke this weekend and I do a debrief after on myself and what's there, client experience, connection, all of that. And sometimes you have time constraints as well. You have other people in the room. You have, if you're doing it in a company, there's a lot there out of your control. And so you want to always go into it with as much, they say the devil's in the details, because the things you don't account for will be, are going to come up. So I was really blessed, as far as, I mean, I definitely have ones that I blanked, but the last several years, I didn't blank any presentations, and I generally, if I was there, I mean, I'm trying to think to back in my younger days, I definitely had lots of presentations where I didn't do any. And one of my mentors at the time, because it's like in sales, you got to sometimes there. And I learned a couple of things from Tony later on in my career where like once, and I'll explain what it is to everybody, but once I got this one thing that explained for me, my sales like quadrupled. But in sales, there's 3 different postures essentially. And I'm a nice guy. Like I'm super nice. And even, and I was so sensitive and caring and connecting. That can be great at a time. And now I've learned to be really dominant and pushy, like a Grant Cardone, like some of these guys, maybe Dan Locke, and that's good at times. So the key skill is sensory acuity and behavioral flexibility. Easier said than done. Acute sensitivity, because sometimes I need to be here, sometimes here, some there, but I was always kind of equal in, and there's a pendulum to this energy that we give of dominant or whatever. But I spend most of my time in composure, and I had a really good, just like that explanation of what I was talking about, like my center of gravity, really good. But when you hear these speakers talk on stage or whatever, at one side of the pendulum, they're over posturing where it sounds like this: people pay me $2 million and I'm so busy and I'm so great. And, I was just doing this. And, so that's based in fear. That's based in fear. I need you to see me. I have a mask and I need you to see me as my mask is really great, so that I don't have to deal with you, or that I have to whatever. Or the other side of it, and this is where my presentation was, and this is where the feedback was, where I botched them. In stressful situations, you're at composure, people will over posture and get dominant and mean. Do you know who the fuck I am type thing? Or they go the other way into collapse. And especially when I started selling for myself, and when I started, I would go into collapse where it sounded like this, like to have me come in for a training, it'd be, 30 grand for a day. And that wouldn't all go to me, that would go to the company. So it's 30 grand for a day. But then when I break off, from Tony, and I do a training and I'm selling me, I'd say, hey, it used to be 30, but now I'll do it for 10. And they'd be paused. I said, well, I'll do it for 5. I actually, how about this? I pay you to come in and train you, and maybe you give me a testimonial. I know I'm kind of new, but I'm just sorry, and so I would start collapsing. And so there's this energy there where you have to be really sensitive. Early on, my energy always went to collapse. And so the feedback I got was to go strong. And so I started going strong at times, and I was one note, and I'd be really strong, and I'd get the people that were insecure, but I couldn't influence the people that were more confident. And so I was like, something's off here in the energy. So this concept of sensory acuity, behavioral flexibility, and I'll go into it a bit, really, really important, but I would have a tendency to collapse. And after one of my mentors told me that I need to push more, he says, you don't know how hard you can go until you've gone too far. You don't know what too far is.
It's interesting you say that, and that just kind of a plug on that. So the first time when I started in sales, I started in car sales, and I'll never forget this, is I just basically walked up to him and I was like, I'm having a problem with selling. Oh no, I said, why is it that was it? Why is it that I can only sell to grandparents that have grandkids, like where they're like 18 and they need to get a car? And why can I only sell like 22-year-olds that have a job and we have to like figure out the financing? And he looked at me straight in the face and he said, because you haven't figured out how to sell to adults yet. I was like, wait, what do you, you go out and you go, what did he mean by that? You're trying to figure it out. And then I realized that there's a different position. There's a different energy. There's a totally different approach that it goes to that audience compared to the, going down negative side, like you're saying.
Yeah. There's
interesting.
There's this, and with salespeople that, we're launching an NLP course for sales, because I've taken so many NLP courses, and it's all this anchoring or visual, auditory, kinesthetic. And it's not that stuff's useless, but it's practically useless for sales. But there's a underlining skill of having a strong identity, and at the same time, having this, so there's all successful people have this, it's called a narcissistic quotient, where they believe like they're almost, I don't like to use the word entitled, but like they have divine intervention, like they're supposed to ruling the dominion. Like they have this ownership over other people's problems and challenges, and they see themselves as almost godlike, like I'm here through divine intervention to be able to help you. And these people with a bit of that mindset, it's come somewhat sociopathic, but at the same time, they're so delusional. Like everybody's delusional, because we often say, like, anything I tell myself about a future outcome, I made it up. So I could say after this podcast, I'm going to go have a drink of water. So I just assume it, but I could fall down, break my neck, drown on a glass of water. Somebody could come in here. So I'm just saying that. And like we're all delusional in that way. So anything about a future outcome, I'm making it up. But at the same time, if I say like, hey, I'm going to invest in this thing, I'm going to go in this course and I'm not going to get results, I made that shit up too. So we're all delusional. And so these people are very delusional in a way that makes them more resourceful. And they have a certain frame in their communication that makes them very powerful. And now the other side of it, there is, especially for really great salespeople, they have empathy and compassion and almost this conformity quotient where they become like other people. And so like with the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, matching and mirroring, I find myself when I'm around people, I start to pick up on their randomness a little bit. Like I can talk to this type of person, and I'm not like completely different people. I'm still me, but there's an element of where my outcome isn't to be like them, it's to connect with them. And so I naturally start using some of their words. And it's very important to use the people's adjectives, the words they use to describe.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Use adjectives.
So any words that you would use to describe something, I would describe what I'm talking about with the same adjective. So nobody picks it up because it just communication goes so fast.
This is an interesting, I've always interested in this topic because I think there was always a shift. I think you'd be a good person to see this ad. But as I talk about, like I was in car sales when I was young, I was like 19, and you talked about Bill Clinton, what were we talking about the other day? We were talking about the boiler room, right? So you have this era with Bill Clinton. Also, that was probably some of the starts of, not all the way, but with television and the way that they can express things. And like, it was like new learning, always be closing these processes with emotional outcomes. Where did you see the shift from, like, let's say the 90s in that type of realm and attitude and things like that to now, where it used to be an always be closing mentality? It was like, I've got to be able to, I have this much time right here to break the ice, get you to like me, go through that process. Where do you see that kind of made a shift? Because I remember they started calling it consultative selling. That was probably what they were transitioning. But when do you remember that changing?
Well, there's been two big shifts. One is the internet. So we used to seek out a salesperson for a source of information. And that person was kind of like God, and they educated you and all of that. And they had this power. Now with the internet, anybody can Google, and they're usually going to Google you first. And so this research, really, really important. And the other shift, 2008, trust, for salespeople and all of that really took a dive, because somebody selling a product or service could put you in a really bad spot. And so, this whole concept of consultative selling, acting in the needs of somebody else's best interest, it's not just morally right. It's good business, because a lot of those companies went out of business. And there's a research company called Huthawait, and they have all this crazy data. The long-term success of a client, they measured it, based on client happiness, how happy they were with their purchase. And they rate all these different criteria. And they were surprised to find that they big things that you find, like when somebody buys something, what makes them happy with their purchase? Is it the product? Like what they actually buy? No. Is it customer service? No. The number one thing that determined the success of the client relationship was the buying experience. And so if somebody has a shitty buying experience, even if you force them to do it, they're not going to feel good about the interaction, and it breaks trust. And sometimes people are like, well, thanks for pushing me into that. So there's a way people will be surprised. And just like when you see Tony Robbins do those interventions, he's saying, you effing pussy, like all this stuff. If you only took that sound bite, it sounds pretty harsh. And there's things that I've said, heaven forbid anybody ever just shared some of that. They do a cancel Eli campaign, because I've said some really harsh things, but it was in a context of that I'm doing it for you, not to you. And I need you to associate enough pain to this behavior to really cue you into the reality of this pattern of thought, feeling, emotion, behavior that you have that is ultimately going to take your life in a really messed up situation. And I need you to own that. And so, so some of these conversations can sound, and I'm not selling widgets here. I am selling coaching. So, that won't always work, but sometimes it can. And there's always there's ways, no matter what you're selling, to be able to leverage that, because people that, they want something, they raise their hand, there's a clear desire here that they have for something. Then most people, a lot of these people, they go a little bit in and they have a pattern of allowing something to hold them back, not just in this conversation, but in their life. And so I will shine the light of awareness on that and guide people out of it. And that's,
if you were to try to find, a good reason on why people should learn to sell, how would you approach that answer to anybody?
I mean, just
that question.
Why should somebody learn how to sell?
Yeah.
Everything sells. So I started a podcast not long ago. It's called the Everything is Influence podcast. And we go into, like, you got to influence yourself, then one-to-one, one-to-many, then legendary influence. And that's not just when you die, which it is, like Steve Jobs, like the impact that you have after you're gone, like what you leave. It could be your book, could be your kids, whatever. Like, this influence is happening all the time. And the impact that you make is all about your influence. But, even billionaires say, like, the number one skill you need to learn is sales, like everything. And sales, to me, it's a spiritual process, because
that's interesting.
There's, just like in life, as you're evolving, I think the purpose of life is to evolve. And we can't evolve, like even the Navy SEALs, when they do those crazy workouts, they call them evolutions, because every evolution through pain, the process of evolving is supposed to be painful. That's why not everybody makes it. And we're, it's this, not survival of the fittest, but, right now, the fact that, like, you're here, everybody listening to you, like where you are, like everybody listening to this, at some point in time, your DNA came from a man who was on a battlefield and survived. There was a woman at home who had to take care of shit or didn't survive.
Oh, so yeah, for sure. Right. Yeah.
We are descendants of survivors, people who pushed through and evolved, and the ones that didn't survive. And so that's like in us. And now we're out of that age where we're not in physical wars so much anymore. I know there's still some, but it's not as prevalent as it was. There is more peace in the world and all that, but the battle is fought, especially in business, linguistically, persuasively, and to dominate with marketing and sales and positioning, and to really understand of that, and it is, I don't mean to be like too combative, but it is somewhat of a war. And I have friends that do what I do, and they're quote unquote competitors, but I share with them all my best stuff, and they share with me all their best stuff.
I've seen you on other people's posts. You're super cool, super open about it. And I think that goes to show, I think that there's a place, as you start to climb the ladders and things, that you still realize there's a lot of market share, a lot of people out there, but just even being around those people make you better. Right.
Yeah. My buddy, Cole Gordon, for example, he's killed it in the space. And I'm speaking at his event soon, and I'll be teaching some of the NLP hacks and all of that. And a lot of it's stuff that Tony taught me. And, and it's having a role model is great. And now I get to be a role model for a lot of people that were where I was. But my role model was Tony Robbins, who's like the GOAT. And, I started with him almost,
I was going to say, for anybody that doesn't know, maybe you can just share the story real quick on kind of, what you did for him.
Yeah, I sold his event, the same job that he had for Jim Rohn, going to companies and doing like an hour talk. And then selling people, he would do these, it's called an FSR, field sales rep. And you're booking your own, it's a grind, and you're out there and, doing this thing, and you got to run the meeting, book the meeting, you're doing all this stuff. And you do these presentations and sell tickets into his main program. And then from there, he would upsell people, and we had processes for the upsell. But that's essentially Tony's funnel. And that's what all seminar companies did. And we were the front lines of it, going into companies and corporations. And I would do these presentations, and I'd get the butts in the seats, essentially, same gig that Tony had. And so that was it. And, it's great to have a role model, and I would definitely not close people, and I wouldn't do well. And I would think to myself, what would have Tony done in that situation? And eventually I got to the point, vicariously, I live with Tony's son and brother-in-law, and I would ask him. Yeah. So after a year, Jarek became my roommate, and then Scott Humphrey, who's Tony's brother-in-law, now pretty much runs the company. And Scott's been a lifesaver for me.
Well, I don't know what year it was, because I'm here in Solana Beach next to Del Mar, but he bought that castle. He bought that castle up on the hill right here.
Yeah, a long time ago.
I can walk out here by the track and see it.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I remember when he got that, because he put that through a lot of his stories, I think.
Yep. That's a good story. Yeah. He had to do some creative financing with that. And he wasn't making much money, but he just decided that's what he wanted and he made it happen. So yeah, I'm in the process now. I'm here in Wellington, Florida. And I looked about 2 weeks ago, I looked at the Wellington Castle. It's not, I'd have to put too much money into it, but it is a good deal. The land alone is worth it. And so I thought about it'd be cool to have the closer's castle.
Dude, of course you'd have. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, come on, I got a castle.
Yeah.
Your dating life will change.
Yeah, it's a little out there. Wellington is an equestrian community. And so a lot of horses all around. It's beautiful, beautiful property, but it's a little out there. And so I don't know if anybody would come. They would come, but it's just out there. It'd be out there for me.
Well, that's the thing. You'd have to make a decision if you want to be out there and be out there, because it's like you get that kind of property, you're going to be investing in it. So what's new with what's the new thing? You got a podcast going, right? You just kicked that thing off, and we were chatting about you learning through some experiences in that. And then what's the next kickoff?
You know, we did sales training for a while and did really good. And I think we have the best sales course out there, but we shut it down because I wanted to focus on speaking. I joined a program with another mentor of mine, a guy named Myron Golden. Really amazing. Saw what he did from stage, and I saw some of the students in there teaching the speaking stuff, and they charge a lot of money. And I had gone through some of their stuff, and it was well below average. And I was like, wow, if they're making 7 figures a month with this, we're going to go into it, because that's what I did. I've done over 3,000 talks for Tony, and I've done thousands of others on my own.
Felt like you were getting back home.
So the speaking sales stuff, and I sold from stage yesterday. And so that's been my wheelhouse. And just along the journey though, I've connected with a lot of people in the communication, influence, hypnosis, arena. And so I've just been fascinated with language and influence, and, whether it's change work, like turning around companies, stuff from Tony. And so I've got a library of all these tools and techniques. And people ask, like, they're like, wait, where should I go for NLP? And I've done so many NLP courses, and it's more for a therapeutic context. There's really nothing out there with a sales context. It's like specifically, how do I have a conversation with somebody and get them to do anything I want with language, given enough of a timeline. And my buddy Chase, for example, he worked United States military for a long time, and he's a real life Jason Bourne. So the fighting stuff, but also creating something called Manchurian candidates, where you can hypnotize somebody and control their mind and they become an assassin. And so that actually happens. It's a government protocol that he invented.
A couple good movies that are wrapped around that.
Yeah. One called the Manchurian candidate, but he created the first successful one.
Got it.
And so, when you see Tony, you're just like, man, if this guy can turn around a suicide. My aha moment when I saw Tony at these events and I was struggling in sales, I said, if he can turn around a suicide, and just with all these cameras in his face and all this stuff, I was like, I wonder if I could use those same techniques to turn around sales. And so my last probably 12 years has just been answering that question. How do I take what he's doing, his ability to create a frame where people feel safe, appreciated, not judged, recognize their patterns, redefine those patterns, solve the problem, reframe the problem in solvable terms, and then link it to something. And so a lot of these associations. So my next big thing, and we'll launch it this month, is an NLP course that is just all the language patterns, all the frames. It's like, if you read any book on this stuff, you have to read like 200 pages to get one nugget.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's out there.
Yeah. And it's most of it's garbage. And so I'm just like, I'm just going to give it, like, this is all this shit. People, a lot of times when I get on these sales, they're like, well, how do you do this and that? And sometimes I'll model something. And my biggest frustration also with sales trainings is I would go to companies, and of course, people always ask these questions like, how do I handle this objection? And I'd be like, well, it depends. There was a few steps that you probably missed here. Let's dig into it. And then even then you can reframe, do all these things. And then here's what I would say. And then they would say it and they wouldn't get the same result. And they would be confused. And at first I was too. I was like, why didn't you get the result? And then I'd listen to the call. I'd hear, I'm like, well, you missed all of this. Yeah. And there's a way through framing. I teach a lot of frames. I did an event with Jordan Belfort a few years ago, and I was able to outsell him on that stage, even though he was the main guy, obviously. And he's, as far as linguistics and all that, he's like legend. He's the best. But yeah, it's when I spoke at the event with Jordan Belfort, there's some things that I did around framing that didn't deframe him, like put him down, but I created a series of frames very quickly that positioned what I was going to talk about as more and more relevant to that audience. And so we teach about 20 frames in the program, but I can give a few here if you want that really shift. And so, a frame is like, if you looked out your front window, you see some stuff, and the brain, generalizes, distorts, deletes information. And we have a pattern of how we see the world. So this is somebody's model of the world. But if I can get you to look out your back window instead of your front window, you see different stuff. And so I want to control your focus by changing and reframing. And so a couple of the frames that I did that I'm always using, especially in videos and marketing, there's a best interest frame. There's old versus new, us versus them. So, even with somebody like Jordan Belfort, say Grant Cardone, I did it unconsciously. I'm like, yeah, that stuff's amazing. It really helped me out a lot. So I compliment. I'm like, that helped me out a lot. But, you guys might have recognized, those principles that he created in the 80s will always be relevant. However, who here would agree that since this thing called the internet, email, social media, do you think that's changed how we communicate today? So now they're saying, so what they just agreed to was that's old, this is new, and this has changed. So I deframed that slightly as being less relevant because things have changed today. So that's old versus new. Us versus them, a lot of slimy salespeople out there, a lot of people that do things that aren't in people's best interest. And if you're here, it's because you want something totally different. And so you and I, like, people say they're coming here for motivation. You don't need motivation. How do I know? Because you're here. It's those fuckers out there. Those are the people so it's like any behavior that I don't want them doing, because some of those people will procrastinate, put things off. So I'll create a negative association to the behavior that is inside of my audience that I don't want them to have. It's like those fuckers, and those people are always like, I got to think about it, all that stuff. Like they thought about coming here. You hear anybody say that they got to think about it, that they're just going to be thinking the rest of their life. So
that's that old saying, like, am I selling you or you selling me? Because they're trying to sell themselves out of the deal, unless it's something they obviously want. But so there's a series of frames that you can do that will position somebody's focus on what you're saying and get them to really dial in and pay attention. And then from there, we can create story and build emotion into it, and then get people opened up for the syntax after they've seen you as their go-to authority. And the stories and things like that too, just with my Santa audition, I open them up emotionally and take them through a process. Yeah. Well, Eli Wilde, this is awesome, man. I appreciate hanging out for a bit, man. I appreciate it. I think this is super killer, man. How do people find you? What's the best way? I know you got the podcast, so we got to get people over there. And then what else? Wildeinfluence.com/go.
And people can get some of my training for free. And we got, some stuff there. I got like a syntax that shows people our structure of how we do a call, how we open, what we look for in the discovery, how we transition, how we pre-frame, how we create this. So it's all there. People can get that. And then mostly just social media. I'm just Eli Wilde on Facebook. Follow my personal page, not my business one. I don't know how to access my business one, but my personal one's the best. And we have a free Facebook group. It's Elite Level Influence, which the acronym is ELI. Cheesy, I know, but I post stuff in there a lot and do some free trainings.
I appreciate you, man. Thanks for being a guest on the Moved Entrepreneur of Wilde podcast, brother. Thanks a lot.
I enjoyed it. Thanks, buddy.
If you like this episode, make sure you smash the like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just like Nike is to athletes, Moved is to entrepreneurs.